Hey, this is David Bailey from Arrabon, and this is our Thoughtful Thursday Quarantine Edition. And I got my good friend, Pastor J. Jonathan Brooks. I oftentimes refer to him as Brooks, and man, all the way from the south side of Chicago. Man, just good brother, man, been knowing each other for years. And man, today the question that we're going to be exploring is, how do you pastor a community in the midst of an epidemic outbreak? Tell us a little bit about like your ministry context, your church, and all that.
All right, most definitely. First of all, thanks for having me.
Glad you're here.
Anytime I get to catch up with you, man, it's a good thing. As I discuss this, man, like the main thing I would say is this: is Inglewood. I'm on the south side of Chicago, a neighborhood called Inglewood, and the reputation of Inglewood is a kind of a place that you would drive through and not drive to.
Mhm.
It's a mostly African American community, almost 100%, like about 95% African American.
Wow.
It's often narrated by its brokenness. So we talk about poverty, we talk about the
Right.
gun violence, we talk
Right.
about neglect as far as jobs and
Right. Right.
business creation. Like those are the type of ways that the neighborhood is narrated all the time, right? Like it's not even like a balance of it, right? Like you
Right.
hear about
Right.
Inglewood, that's all people are going to talk about.
Right. Right.
Whereas when you started describing it, you say, yo, your neighborhood is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
no set of challenges. That's not often the way it's narrated. And so I'm not only just a pastor here and raising my family here, but it's also the neighborhood I was raised in.
Right.
And so
Right.
you grow up with that same narration as a kid of saying, well, Inglewood, because of all the bad stuff that everybody narrates, is a place to escape. It's not a place to like stay and invest and
Right.
grow and raise your family. And so I had that same mentality all growing up. It's like my success was bound up in my escaping from this neighborhood. And
Right.
that's
Right.
the main narrative of the neighborhood, whether it's a kid, an adult, a senior, it's escapism. How do I get out?
Yeah. You made it when you
Um,
made it. Like getting out means you made it, right?
that's it. That's it.
Right. Right.
That's
Right.
it. Yeah. So, for me, my context of ministry is really about broadening that understanding. And
Right.
I don't say necessarily changing the narrative because the brokenness in our community is a part of our narrative.
Right. 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 Right.
But
Right.
what I say is completing the narrative. It's like
That's
being
good.
honest about the beautiful, resilient, amazing people, all the amazing things that happen here, and not allowing a single story to narrate any neighborhood or any person. So,
It's interesting you bring that up because I actually think that when when I describe your community as being beautiful, I think you taught me that, really, to be honest. I mean, particularly being in the South and Richmond, Virginia, when we hear about the South side of Chicago,
yeah.
I can't think of like outside of you have I had any well, maybe past the oldest moms, but
Right.
like, I mean, for the most part, when I hear about the South side of Chicago and Michelle Obama now, but like,
Come on, shout out, baby. Stop stunned.
but I don't like it's not a positive thing, right? It's
Yeah,
rarely ever
yeah,
a positive situation.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think you really do have to. I like that whole like completing the narrative. And so you got some really dope theology around uh church and place,
Yeah, yeah.
and you've really dedicated your life around being around church and place. And I think what's kind of some intersection because my wife and I've oriented our life around church and place. Like we
Hmm.
have been like we moved into this neighborhood we moved into um as part of a community engagement, community development, a Christian based perspective, and that's the circumstance in which we met. In that shared love and passion and call. But
Hmm.
I think one thing that's different from you than it is from me is that I grew up in kind of a working middle class Black family in the suburbs
Okay.
that would go in and do urban inner city ministry. And like my dad actually, he literally grew up in this neighborhood. Blocks away from where I live now. Um, but you grew up in this neighborhood and then you left, went to school, and then you kind of came back. And like both of us have a commitment to both place and the role that the local church plays into that.
Right.
But it's very interesting because we came about it from two different contexts, and
Right.
two different
Right.
experiences. And I think and both are very needed, in this time and space. So could you just like share a little bit about your like theology of both church and place?
Yeah. Absolutely. So for me, I can't separate the two, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that the context of how we do church, how we are the church,
Yep. Yep.
is completely connected to the place in which God placed us. So that's the first thing about my
That's
theology
good.
of place, is that I think, especially as Americans, that there's some other countries and other cultures that seem to have this down better than us.
Yep.
But as a culture in America, we
Yep.
often think of place as an afterthought. Like we get to
Yeah.
select and choose the most
Yep.
comfortable place for us to live.
Yep.
We go find the house we want. We
Yep.
go choose the area,
Yep.
the schools. Like that's the way we do it. Whereas I'm under the unction that God actually leads and directs us to places,
Yep.
and
Yep.
places us places because He needs us there, right?
Yep.
Like there
Yep.
is a plan about where we're placed. And I think that what I'm seeing in a lot of Christian circles, especially when we talk about church, is people looking at places not as places to live, but as places to do ministry. So like we
Hey,
we
hold
go.
pause, man. Oh, time out. Yo, say that one more time.
Yeah, that we have fallen prey to this mindset that places, neighborhoods, whatever, are places to do ministry, not
Yes.
places to live. And
Yes.
so that's why we do
So
outreach.
good.
That's why we go make a church in that troubled neighborhood, but then go live over here.
Yep.
And never in God's creation did God create places for us to minister to them. No,
Yeah.
we're called to live in them, right? To be a part of them, to be a fabric of them. And out of that living comes the ministry, right? Like our ministry is not supposed to be something we go do. We don't punch the clock to do ministry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ministry
Yeah.
is who
Yeah.
we are.
Yep.
But when we detach ourselves from the actual place where God has told us to be and decided to be more comfortable in a place we like to be,
Yeah.
then now ministry becomes something we go do versus something we just live.
Man, and amen, man. I love how you articulated that. And like, I even know I kind of almost experienced what I call like a third conversion. I
Mm,
had the blessed honor to be able to spend a week with Dr. Willie James Jennings going through his book Christian
mm,
Imagination.
mm,
And this was like maybe 2018, like 2 years ago, almost two summers
mhm,
ago. And that was the first time that I really understood the role of the Christian faith in land. Like
mm,
one of the things that he said
mhm.
to me was like, "Hey, think about whenever God did something in the Old Testament, they always named the place like Bethel
That's
or
right.
or like you always like put a
A
landmark, a
monument. Yep.
monument, a act of worship in a particular place."
That's
And
right.
so then even if you think about the story of the Old Testament, right? Like in Genesis, like go back to Abraham. Abraham like was called to go to a particular place, and that was a
That's
promise
right.
in a place. Uh, um, that promise wasn't fulfilled in the place; it was actually in a dislocated place. Where they were
That's
in
right.
Goshen, right, and they had oppression, and the promise was to go to a place. And how did they steward that place? And when they didn't steward that place well, that they got kicked out of that place, and when they got put back, it was occupied. I mean, like it was all about place. And part
Yep.
of what he pointed out to me and what to us in the class was that what the colonial imagination and location like has like the disease of colonialism has taught us that place is disconnected to our faith.
That's right.
That like
That's
it's
right.
something that you're on top of and not as something that you're a part of. And almost when you began to start talking about the land and faith and spirituality, it almost sounds like people are, oh, you're doing syncretism,
Right. Right.
but it's
Because
actually like yeah.
it's because we're so dislocated. So I'll tell you what did it for me. I was already on this kind of mind, like this thought and this thought wave, and but then I got a chance to go to the Holy Land,
Yeah. Yep.
and my context of understanding theology in place was really from my neighborhood, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
But when I got to go to the Holy Land and
Yep.
experience what I was reading in scripture, what I understood about Old Testament, New Testament,
Yes.
in my
Yes.
lungs, in my legs,
Yeah.
like breathing the air,
Yeah.
right? Hearing the words of Jesus, reading the words of Jesus from the places he was standing and seeing him using visible landmarks.
Yeah.
Like he's not just
Yeah.
randomly calling the Pharisees whitewashed tombs. He's looking up at the cemetery, which is
Yes.
the Mount of Olives, and saying,
Yeah.
"You guys are whitewashed tombs," right? Like this,
Yeah.
it's clear all the things that
Yeah.
are going on,
Yeah.
and so it further connected me to this notion of like there is no understanding this Bible
Yeah.
unless you understand the place in which it's contextualized.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
it's like that with everything else too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without place, we can only strip it of its original intent unless
Oh
we
yeah.
understand how it's placed. Period.
Man, that's so real, and it's like so important for the people of God, really, because like our theology is an incarnational theology,
Mm.
versus like various other types of world religion. It's really about a philosophy or like understanding, like it's kind of in head or a practice or principles you live by. But what's really interesting is about God, right? Like God
Mm-hmm.
had to come embodied and into a place in order for us to engage a new level of redemption, of restoration, of reconciliation. And so we don't have a Christian faith without incarnation, right?
That's it.
But what's really fascinating, like pre-COVID, there was some health care challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
Already. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But then like we're hearing the crazy amount of deaths and COVID scenarios that are happening in the South Side. I mean, in Chicago in general, but particularly hitting on the South
Mm-hmm.
Side and the West.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I heard a friend of mine say it this way: when tragedy hits, injustice is always revealed.
Yes. Magnified.
It's magnified, yeah. So just kind of share a little bit, man. Like pre-COVID, what were some healthcare challenges that you would deal with,
Yep.
like on a pastoral level, or just at a community level, and then just kind of what has it been like in this during COVID? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's it's a big ball kind of that like all is jumbled together. So you can't really talk about the healthcare issues without talking about some of the other things that happen.
Hmm.
Um, but number one, just like most kind of poor communities of color, right? Like we're already dealing with higher rates of things like diabetes,
Hmm.
people dealing with hypertension and,
Right.
kidney failure. I mean, like I had that type of stuff already happening in my community, in my congregation. Of course, we got drug abuse.
Right.
We got, all these things. And then, everybody talk about South Chicago. So we always talking about gun violence and
Yeah.
like the trauma that comes with that. So you got
Right.
mental instability, you got
Right.
folks scared of, all the things that people know about, right?
Yeah.
And they're already magnified because along with that comes the high rates of poverty, right? Which
Yeah.
means that you got very few people with health insurance.
Yeah.
And then not only that, then like the only hospital in the neighborhood is like one of the like worst hospitals in the city, right? And so it's
Oh, so y'all actually do have a hospital.
we do St. Bernard Hospital, which I actually love St. Bernard, so I don't want that to go out there as if I think that it works, but like that's the way they would be narrated
Yeah,
by the
totally. I
rest
mean,
of the
well,
city.
I mean, you gotta look at this. Like, I mean, it still comes down to the bottom line, right? Like, so,
Yeah.
I mean, we got a hospital walking distance from me too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's been the historically black space. But I'm gonna just let you know, the medical innovations does not happen at that hospital right there, right?
Right, right,
Right.
right,
So
right.
even it could be still a good hospital,
Yeah, yeah.
but it
That
might not
cares
necessarily
about
be
the
the best
people.
hospital.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And this what's crazy is this as a caveat. Like I had gotten a call because maybe a week and a half prior to everything getting shut down,
Hmm.
because Saint Bernard was about to enter into a three-way partnership with Advocate and Rush hospitals to try to bring more resources to the hospital by kind of like being in partnership. They were trying to bring people from the neighborhood in to say a little bit more about what we might need, hear
Right.
more about it, and then a week and a half later, the whole world went to crazy, right? And
Oh
so it
yeah.
just goes to show like the hospital's been there for decades, right? Why are you
Yeah.
just now starting to invest in it? And then you
Just
never
now.
know. Yeah,
Right.
you never know. And now we find ourselves in this scenario. But to get back to answer your question,
Man,
right? Like,
just you think about a quote. I just want to quote Michael Larry Dyson. He
mm,
said like when America gets a cold, Black America gets pneumonia. You
come on,
know,
man, that's
and
it.
so and I think that's kind of like that's an illustration of that, right? Like there was not an investment that was going in that particular like hospital location.
Hmm.
Then you get ready to have it. You like catch up. Like it's been going on for decades. You catch up, and then COVID hits, and then you like no telling when. I mean, maybe that might be an encouragement for people to actually invest. Or,
Right.
but now we're in a situation where people are like trying to figure out how to survive on their own. and it's like cats are feeling like it's like a pneumonia experience.
That's right.
All right, go
That's
ahead,
right.
bro.
So I think what we've seen, and it was no surprise, whether it was to those of us working in the communities like Inglewood or Lawndale or Austin or whatever, and even to our elected officials, everybody knows Chicago is a super segregated city. It's super diverse, but we eat, play, watch sports teams together. But when we go home, we go to our various spots, and then that's just the way it goes.
Right.
So when this hit, you know, one of the first questions that were being asked in Chicago is where's the demographic information? Where is it? Because we already knew,
Right.
right? And so all of the original data that's coming out is just general, just general, just
Right.
general. And
Right.
Chicago is one of the first cities yelling, where is the demographic information?
Right.
We need to know what areas are getting hit the hardest. And
Right.
when it comes out that 77.8% of the deaths that related to COVID were Black folks, and then like 89 to 90% of the cases were
Right.
Black folks, it's like, of course, right?
Right.
And then it was even more frustrating to me because um, while that is the reality, Black folks, I've talked about this in the Christianity Today podcast I did. It's like Black folks don't look at something that the government says is really bad and go, "Oh, we better change our life." You don't trust the government.
Right.
You don't trust anything I
Facts.
got to say. You trying to tell me not to go to work? You ain't gonna pay these bills. You trying
Right.
to tell me I can't take the bus? I ain't. And so for the first couple of weeks, Black folks ain't listening to
Right. Right.
that,
I mean,
right?
well, it's like, why, yo, dude,
And why should we?
what day? You tell me what day we was like, yep, this is a good time to trust the government. like,
Exactly.
or even like, what day is like a good time to trust the medical field, right? I mean, particularly
Exactly.
I mean, those cats, like the Tuskegee, like you still got people alive
That's
that
right.
was like getting on the Tuskegee experiment,
Syphilis
right?
experiment. Yep.
Yeah,
The story of Henrietta Lacks when they taking people's cells and reproducing them without their permission.
and
They're like
making
Black
billions
folks.
of dollars off of it. And their family ain't got a dime, bro. So it's like,
Black folks.
cause
Yeah.
Bishop Gerald Glenn died. He was a pastor, and like the New York Times, he's a pastor here in Richmond, like literally,
Okay.
down the street, for where I live, and he died. And the New York Times did an article and said that pastor dies and says that God is bigger than COVID, and he dies, right? Like that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
framing of it. And so again, these are like, and these I would assume might even be like white progressive kind of like New York
Mm-hmm.
Times. It ain't like the most conservative newspaper, right? And and so these are people that's like technically woke. And the New York Times, I generally appreciate how they write different like articles and get different
Yep.
perspectives and stuff. But I'm just saying this particular angle, they're bringing Black folks into this majority kind of white science versus faith, evolution versus creation
Mm-hmm.
type of conversation. And I'm like, that ain't what that brother was thinking about
At all.
at all. Like that was not like what he was talking about. Like he was even, and even like my pastor was just saying, like he was trying to think about like his people. Like, how do I care and offer leadership to my people? I mean, that's what a lot of Black pastors are thinking about, right? He was a pillar in his community. That man
Mm-hmm.
was 68 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you gotta have when you can't trust your government, and when you can't trust the medical space,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta have faith in God, because you can't have
Yep.
faith in those other things.
Yep.
And so, of course, like God is gonna be bigger than COVID, because God's had to be bigger than all types of stuff. And then on top of that, when you look at like how Black men, in particular his age, got respect, right? You and I went to college, man.
Yeah. Right. Right.
There's a lot of sacrifices that happen. So whether people know we're pastors or ministry or not, I mean, matter of fact, in these days, sometimes you don't let people know so that
That's right.
like, so they can't respect you. But like, I could be like, yo, I got an architecture
Right.
degree. I like, we just in a different time. Like, I'm a public speaker or I'm a producer or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We can get respect. But when you're 68 years old, being a pastor was probably like the only thing that you could do to get respect.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Mm-hmm.
that was a significant part of his identity, and how he made a contribution to this world. And so just the way they just frame that conversation, I know it's supposed to be your interview, but that joke just got me on my soapbox, man.
I hear you, man.
Like that's just messed up, man. It's messed up how folks are framing, and that ain't even what our conversation is. Like, we've had to kind of rely on ourselves and rely on God as far as on earth, kind of rely on our community to help
That's
us to
right.
get through and all these type of things.
That's the conversation about care, though. Like when you're talking about how do you care for a community in the middle of a pandemic or something, right? Like what I have prided myself on as a community member first, but as a pastor and a father and all the other things in this community, is that I'm not waiting for tragedy to strike for my everyday to be about being connected in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And because of that, when tragedy does strike, nobody's surprised or wondering where do we go to find resources, where do we go to be connected, what do we do, right? There was no work for my congregation to begin a phone. We didn't have to like find out who our neighbors were and what their
Right.
needs were, right? Like
Right.
everybody was calling me like, hey, Pastor Jay,
Right.
y'all gonna have some food? Hey, Pastor Jay, y'all gonna be doing this? Hey, like it was
Right.
expected because it's what
Right.
we do all the time,
Right.
right?
Right.
Hey, people losing their job, you got some resources people can connect to? Absolutely. Already been
Right.
calling to find out what's available. And to me, this is why, like, when I talk about being practicing presence
Yeah.
all the time, right? Like that, we ought to be present and being concerned about one another at all times. When we get into hot water or people fall into tough times,
Yeah.
now we're not trying to put together a ministry plan. We're not trying to put together an outreach
Yeah.
plan. We're
Yeah.
living out of the abundance of who we've been all along.
Yeah.
And to me, that's why it was such a no-brainer, right? We're not doing anything different than we was doing before the pandemic. It just ain't in the church building. That's it.
Yep. Yep. Totally. Totally.
That's it.
Totally. Yep.
Whereas I know a lot of other churches, man, like they trying to figure out how do we respond in these times. That's why people gonna tune into this podcast. What do we do in this time? And I was just
Right.
like,
Right.
yes, well, the things that you should have been doing all along, right? Like now it's time to get into deeper relationship with people. It's
Yeah.
time to allow people to name their needs and to
Yep.
participate in meeting their own needs, right?
Yes.
And one another's. It's time for us to start looking at how the church is an asset to our community and not something that's separate from it, right? And not
Yes.
domineering and trying to tell the community how it's supposed to behave, but joining in and being a part of what the community is already doing.
Yeah.
When you do those things, moments like this, has it been hard? Sure.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been hard for us to know who we are. It hasn't
Yeah.
changed our identity as a congregation. It hasn't changed my identity as a community member or as a pastor.
Yeah.
So that's
Man, I
what's
mean,
important.
I'm gonna circle back on one thing you said, but I think it's like a really important piece that you bring up is the fact that like when you're like a black church, you're having to already uh, um, deal with the needs of the people. You're not oftentimes dealing with like highly resourced folks, or if you are, like like if it's a black middle class kind of space, your cousin, and
Yep.
not even your cousin, like your brother or like somebody else, like somebody in your family, you're gonna have to take care of. Like I think
That's right.
about every person of color that I know that's like in our circles, so like national speakers, and we travel. I mean, it's almost like you get like a little bit of like survivor's guilt or something like that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
and just and you have to like kind of like take care of family or mom or like and and rarely like unless like I mean my white counterparts that like in our same equivalent, a lot of them aren't dealing with the same type of contrast of like economic
Yes.
contrast
Yes.
or like social economic. Even if like they got folks that are dealing with disabilities, they're like the resources there to kind of help. And I'm talking about in our peers of people that share the
Mm-hmm.
stage with us. And
Mm-hmm.
so like our churches have to be churches that are relevant to that context. And so something like a COVID, what that does, it increases the need a
Yes.
ton. Like it just
Yes.
increases the need to a whole nother level.
Oh, yeah, and I think I could piggyback off that. If I was to give somebody some real like practical advice, I would say that what it did is it helped us to kind of solidify systems,
Right.
right? So we're a very organic church that like just you can come ring the doorbell and get some sugar, right? Like it's that
Right. Right.
neighborly, right?
Right.
Well, when it goes from one person ringing the doorbell for sugar to 300 people saying we ain't got no sugar, right?
Right.
Like now you have to begin to solidify systems and say, okay, we got to think about how we're going to make this contactless. We got to think about what time people can come, where are we going to get sugar from, how are we going to, right? And so that's what happened. Like we were able to systematize things in a way that was, but it did not change the fact that people looked at us as the place that would do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, what the weight that's been placed on me now is placing people in the right positions to
Yeah.
be able to actually fulfill the needs of the people as they've increased. So
Yeah.
we went from having a food cooperative like we normally do on Mondays to turn it into a food distribution center. So
Yeah.
we do, people used to pay $1 a week, come in, shop, it was real organic. You pick whatever you want. But we had to change that because we were
Yeah.
serving way more people, and we're thinking more about doing relief for people than we are about empowering people in this moment. But
Yeah.
we still got empowerment at our core. We don't
Yeah.
do this to be forever. This is a momentary thing. So those are the type of things that have changed.
Yeah, and that's the thing I want to circle back. I mean, you talked about doing relief versus doing empowerment, right? And your church is an empowerment church, you know.
Absolutely.
You even said like, hey, when you come in to kind of work with, like, ask people what do they need and how can you kind of help them with the things that they need, like how can you partner together. So can you just
Mm-hmm.
like talk a little bit about just the disposition and like how the posture
Mm-hmm.
that we Christians need to have when we're in um, communities that might have less material wealth. And,
Yeah.
and I choose that word, less material wealth, but I don't want to say poor communities because they just not, it's not all, like there's a lot of creativity and innovation
Yeah.
and under like, and I don't like the word under resourced because everything's not under, but I mean economically under resourced or
Mm-hmm.
materially under resourced or poor. But there's so much creativity
Yeah.
in just poor communities of color. But go ahead, just kind of like what
Yeah.
should be the disposition?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I think you narrated it best. The right there. I don't even have to do my fancy word when right there. Like the truth is you have to be able to see both the beauty and the brokenness in a place. And
Yeah,
if you can see the full beauty and brokenness, I call it wearing your bifocals, like being able to see all the amazing ways in the
yeah,
neighborhood or people are, and then all the broken things that people have to deal with. It also helps you to see wherever you're coming from in the same light. So that you stop having a false dichotomy about your own place that you live, right?
yeah.
Maybe you've narrated as more beautiful and not being honest about the amount of brokenness that's there. So
Facts.
your disposition changes in the fact that you actually see the world the way God does. Right? God
Yes.
doesn't come into Inglewood and be like, oh, it's so messed up here. These folks need to get it together. And he
Yeah,
don't drive out to some fancy suburb and go, now this is what I was talking about. They got it together. No, God sees the
yeah,
full picture. And so we as God's people have to be able to see the full picture too.
yeah,
So it changes the way you interact with people and interact in ministry, because now you're not only coming in as a service provider, but at all times you also know you're a service recipient. And you
yeah,
live in that dichotomy of I'm also gaining as I'm giving.
yeah.
Right. And you never forget that. So that when you come, if you don't feel like you gaining something, then there's something you're doing wrong. Right. Like
Right,
your attitude or your disposition is incorrect.
right.
So that's why when we talk about empowerment, I don't just host a co-op, a food cooperative at our church. I'm a part of the food
Yeah,
cooperative at my church, right?
yeah,
So that the
yeah,
food that we gain there, it's not benefiting them. Who is
yeah,
them?
yeah.
No, it's us, right?
Right,
Like my
right,
family
right.
gets healthy food in an area that's often narrated as a food desert, right?
Yeah,
Like when we started off our coffee shop, right? It's not I'm going to make a coffee shop for them people who don't have no coffee. It's like I want to take my daughters to go sip lattes, right?
yeah,
And so we
right.
benefit. And I think that's the attitude that has to shift in the church. That's why I was talking about places, not as places of ministry, but as places to live.
Yeah,
Because when you live in a place,
yeah,
how it flourishes and the people there flourish actually matters to you now. It's
yeah.
not a matter of like, oh, look at what we've done.
Right,
This is my life, you
right,
know? And I think
right.
we have got to get back to being intimately involved in the places we live in so that the work that we do is not about helping other people, but it's about flourishing, community flourishing, which includes us.
Yeah, that's good, man. All right, so you know, I always be trying to like look out for you, bro, and like I ain't gonna totally put you out here. I'm gonna try to do this as discreetly as possible, but this is all in a desire to look out. Like I think about the stuff that you do with your church, and then I ask you for your budget. Like what's y'all's church budget, bro? I know pastors they ain't even the senior pastors. Their salaries are higher than your whole church budget, and you putting the work in.
Yeah.
So one thing
Yeah.
I'm gonna say is anybody that's watching this podcast, video, anything, is like, man, y'all need to support this church. It's called Canaan
Yeah.
Community Church, right?
That's it. Canaan Community Church
Yeah,
in
support
West
Canaan
Inglewood.
Community Church. I mean, they putting in and doing the work, man. Like
I
doing
tell
the
you,
work.
man, David. Look, bottom line, in my opinion, um, I understand it. Like, I'm not trying to say that I ain't trying to increase our annual budget, because I am, right? Like, I want us
Right.
to be able to do more. But what we've learned is that the reason why, the only time I use the word under resourced, really, because I don't like that word as much either,
Yeah.
is when in the context of people understanding what the greatest resource in the world is, the human resource.
Yeah.
People are the greatest resource in the world.
Yeah.
And what I've learned from my congregation is that when I can tap into the raw passion and talent of the people there, we can do so much more than we can with people just throwing money at us.
Yeah.
Now, I'll take your money, throw it, please. But what I'm saying is the reason why we've been able to do this is because we have tapped into not only the congregation, but the entire community.
Yes.
And said, if we want to see our community be all that we want it to be, we
Right.
need you to be a part of bringing your gifts, bringing your passion, bringing your ideas, bringing your vision, and let's
Right.
put it all together.
Right.
And so when we start putting it all together, man, it's like, dang, you can do a whole lot of stuff when people start putting stuff together.
Right.
And I'm learning that finances follow vision. Like when
Right.
people see, dang, they started a coffee shop. Now
Right.
people give it to the coffee shop. Like, oh,
Right.
man, they do a whole food grocery store cooperative at their church and got their own gardens and growing their own food. Now finances are following that. And so I think for me, what I'd like to encourage people to recognize is that when you do things looking for financial gain, that's
Right.
usually when they flop.
Yes.
But when you do things looking for communal flourishing,
Yep.
that's when I believe that the finances follow you, because people are like, that's good work.
Well, see, I mean, and I want to amen what you're saying, right? And I think part of why I'm making this kind of like pitch in this space, right? And I mean, this wasn't even like the agenda, but I just think it's so important. I'm always encouraged because you think about Silicon Valley, right? That it won't like there was money trees in Silicon Valley.
Right.
Like these are people who are saying, "Hey, I'm trying to create something for the flourishing, hopefully for the flourishing, but or I like to make money, right, for the country. Like I'm going to add value to the world." And you got people that think that, oh, because of the location of Sanford, because of like all of that like startup money and the water that they start up, just juices and innovation that's in the water, that's a great place to invest into. And what I'm saying to folks is like Inglewood, because of Jonathan Brooks and because of Michelle Brooks and because of Canaan Community Church, like that there's a great place to invest in, like you would invest in Silicon Valley. But it's not that you get an economic return, you get kingdom return.
Yes.
And bro, you and I be on these like, these spaces, and you got people that, I mean, there's a lot of people that doing great ministry, but there's a lot of people that do a lot of janky ministry with a lot of cash. Janky ministry with cash. And when you got cash, you could polish up a turd, and it's like, oh, that's shiny, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? And and people look at that shiny object, but here it is that you got something that's like legit. That what y'all do in that community, and there just needs to be capital that's in there. So I just want to encourage people to engage in the capital at Inglewood and try to find the Canaan community churches and the Jonathan Brooks in your community. So I'm gonna try to like bring this to a close. It's been such a great conversation. We got to do another one again. But how would you what do you recommend? What can the church do about this kind of situation that we've discussed, like people that aren't in Chicago or just that are like checking in as part of a local church community? What can they do?
Yeah. So first thing I would say is this: I'm gonna give you some really practical stuff. First off, you got to take inventory of who you are and who you want to be. Right. When you look at your community, and you see the needs, you need to also process the assets? You know, these are what we need, but who's already here? What do we already have? You got to look at how you set yourself up in that community. I always tell people you set yourself up one of three ways. Either you set yourself up as a fortress that's just there to protect yourself and your own self desires, right? Or you set yourself up as the savior of the neighborhood. So you're gonna do stuff for people all the time, but they got to stand outside until you're ready for them to come in. You're gonna tell them what time it can happen. You're gonna tell them what they need and all that good stuff because you're the savior. Or you're gonna set yourself up as a partner in the neighborhood where you'll humbly come in and say, hey, what can we do together that will allow for communal flourishing in our neighborhood? And I just tell people, start taking inventory of that. When you look at the things that you do as a church, not don't talk about, you know, your dreams and goals. What are you already doing?
Yeah.
Do you see which three of those do you see most of the stuff you're doing falling into?
Yeah.
Or is it mostly just internal, just for you and your congregation?
Yeah.
Do you do stuff to try to help the neighborhood, but it's on your agenda?
Yeah.
Or do you do stuff in the sense of like, we're not going to do anything? Like our church has made a decision. We're not going to do anything unless our community says it needs to be done.
Yeah, that's good, bro. That's really, really good. Well, man, thank you so much for just your just taking the time, man, and the bunch of mics that you dropped, man. It was just like, hey, one thing you forgot to tell people is, man, you actually got a book.
Yeah.
You got
I
a book.
Would definitely do that. So, I don't have mine. I didn't grab it, but the name of the book, wonderful people, is called Church Forsaken: Practicing Presence in Neglected Neighborhoods. Published by InterVarsity Press. You can pick it up at Amazon.com. You can pick it up at ivypress.com. Right now during COVID, it is 50% off because I want people reading. So go ahead and grab your copy. Also, I want to plug that there is a free small group Bible study curriculum that goes with it that you can download at walkingtowardslove.com. Totally free.
Wow.
And you can go through the book with some friends or, you know, get you a small group together. And the focus of the book is to really talk about the things that we need to practice in order to make up for the things that we've forsaken for comfortability in our neighborhood. So.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. Well, man, I just want to say, man, just thanks for time. I love the book.
Thank you, bro.
It's been like really good. I've like just learned a ton. Always learned a ton in our conversations one-on-one. I'm really glad we're able to do this online, and so hopefully I'll get my team to make sure that these references are in the actual notes and stuff like that.
Cool.
But I just want to say again, y'all give it up for Jonathan Brooks, Pastor Jay, and thanks for doing another Thoughtful Thursday. God bless y'all. Thanks so much for watching the Thoughtful Thursday video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it in the comment section. Please share this video with some friends or family or coworkers that might be interested. And also hit that subscribe button so that you can get your Thoughtful Thursday question for next week.